Hello and welcome to another one of my vlogs. I'm Mr. Lang and today we're going to be talking about imperialism. Now, imperialism is the quest for colonies. Again, basically, it's when the big countries want to grab up all little countries, and these are the reasons why. For four main things. They not only need markets, again, to sell their goods, but they also want raw materials. Certain things cannot be grown in, say, France. So, of course, they're going to take over French Indochina, or Vietnam as it's known today, because of the rubber tree, something they can't get in France. They want to spread democracy. They also want to spread Christianity. Again, a lot of times they saw these tribes, especially in Africa that we're going to be talking about, as being very barbaric, and they want to, again, save them through missions. And again, the desire for power and prestige. The more colonies they got, the more of an empire you see. And almost every country is going to be doing this. And this includes the scramble for Africa. Now, as you can see, Africa is carved up basically by all these different countries, again, wanting that land there. And as you can see, they do get, all the different countries get different land in Africa. While over in Asia, they have the different spheres of influence. Again, in China, you're going to have regions where particular country has exclusive rights over mines, railroads, and trade. That's what spheres of influence is, and that's what they do over here in China. And this includes Britain, France, Germany, and Russia. Now, the US wanted in on that, because you notice they weren't on that? So we have Secretary of State John Hay call for the open door policy, which basically states that all nations should have equal access to trade and investment in China. Do you think we asked if China that was okay with China? No. Now, all this fighting over land for colonies is going to lead to wars. One such crisis is the Spanish-American Crisis, where, you never heard of it? Spanish-American Crisis? Never heard of this? Well, it's a conflict between Spain and the United States, and it didn't take place in Spain or the U.S. It actually happened in Cuba. To make it even more confusing, right? That's okay. We're going to totally straighten you out here. Check it out. So, Spain owned Cuba. Spain, Cuba. Why did Spain want to own Cuba? Well, think again, like imperialism. Spain wanted to get all the goodies from Cuba, like sugar and cigars. So, many Americans did business in Cuba. Why? It's 90 miles off the coast of the Florida Keys. Again, it's right there at the entrance to the Gulf of Mexico. It ends up being one of those, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, where Cuba sells sugar to the U.S., so the U.S. had invested $50 million in Cuba's mines, railroads, and sugar plantations. And a little background info between the two countries. Spain had owned Cuba for centuries and was making lots of money from it. And many of the Cubans had been slaves to the Spanish in the past, but now you thought they weren't slaves, but they weren't much better off either. And they had very few freedoms and were not able to have their own government. And so, of course, we have Jose Marti. He's a Cuban guerrilla fighting against Cuban authorities. And after the Cubans' rebellion collapses in 1878, Jose Marti and other Cuban rebellions, they fled up to the U.S. and they wait and they plan a revolution. Now, Jose Marti is a writer, and he's a poet, and he wants to raise awareness of the Cubans' problems. And so he helped raise money, weapons, and train troops for when the time was right, he would go to Cuba and strike again, in which he will do. Now, is there a build-up to a possible war? Well, after Cuba's uprising in 1895, we have President Grover Cleveland declare the U.S. as being completely neutral. It's during his second term, which wasn't his best term either. We have guys that are not neutral, and these are going to be people like William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer. These guys are considered what they call yellow journalists. What is yellow journalist? Well, yellow journalism, what they write about, is basically when you have U.S. newspapers printing daily exaggerated stories of the rebellion to attract readers. Yellow journalism is really when you take the truth and you stretch it so much that it actually isn't really truth anymore. Now, you have General Valerio Huayla, again from Spain, aka the Butcher, and he herded Cuban villagers into concentration camps so they would not support the rebels fighting against the Spanish. And we have tens of thousands of Cubans dying in these camps of starvation and disease. He really is a massacrist. And so McKinley tries to negotiate with Spain. He says, all right, Spain, let's end this conflict in Cuba. If not, we're going to be getting all up in your grill, basically. So, of course, you have Spain saying, like, okay, here's what we'll agree to. We'll get rid of the butcher, and we'll give Cubans their own government, but they still kind of have to be part of the Spanish Empire. And of course, it becomes deal or no deal. Like, okay, Cuban rebels, what's it going to be? And so, of course, Jose Marti and the rebels say, I think it's no, Viva la Cuba, no deal. And of course, what ends up happening is the U.S. sends a USS Maine to the coast of Cuba, right in Havana Harbor, just in case things get messy. Okay? Just in case. Now, we have two sparks that could lead the U.S. to declare war on Spain. We have the Spanish ambassador's letter called the Delome letter that basically said that McKinley was weak and a bidder for the admiration of the crowd, basically saying anything to get people to like him. And we also have the USS Maine exploding in Havana Harbor. And again, through the activity, you're going to see a little bit more about that. But it explodes, and we don't know why. Look at that huge yellow journalist right there. Again, it really looked like more like this. Okay, yellow journalism, way exaggerated, with people flying in the air, and then what it really looked like, people getting away in rowboats. But nevertheless, who did it? Again, American journalists blamed Spain immediately, and the American public was outraged and demanded war against Spain. They even had "Remember the Maine" as a slogan. And after the war, it was confirmed that the USS Maine actually got blown up due to an engine fire. Not bad. But in April 1898, the US and Spain are at war. Now, you have literally the Spanish saying, "Lo siento, tío Sam," and of course Uncle Sam saying, "Your days are numbered." So the Spanish-American War erupts, and when it does, we have some intense fighting. Again, yellow journalism. That's really more what it looks like. Now, the U.S. Navy takes the Philippines, which is in the Pacific Ocean, which had been part of the Spanish Empire, and we send 17,000 troops landing on Cuba's mainland. And among these troops is a volunteer unit called the Rough Riders. You may have heard him before. It has nothing to do with that DMX band. Again, there he is, ta-da, Teddy Roosevelt, future president. But we have the Rough Riders, a voluntary cavalry unit made up of American cowboys, miners, and law officers. Again, there are no professional soldiers in this regiment. And of course, Teddy Roosevelt is their leader. And they do the classic charge up San Juan Hill, you may have heard. That's what they do. So, they assist in capturing San Juan Hill. About a quarter of total American troops fighting Cuba are actually African American as well, fun fact, and Teddy Roosevelt led the Rough Riders with his close friend Leonard Wood. Now, Americans occupied the Spanish colony of Puerto Rico as well, and on August 12, 1898, Spain and the U.S. agreed to a ceasefire. It's a pretty short war. That's why you haven't heard of it, right? Again, very short. Lasted about 5 months. But we won! Awesome! The U.S. ended up getting Cuba, Puerto Rico, Philippines, and the Guam. Now, you're going to see a little more Teddy Roosevelt soon. Now, the American Empire is born now. What should we do with the U.S.? We got all this new land. So, Cuba's given their freedom as promised. We weren't going to keep it. Remember, this is the time during imperialism. We have all these big countries taking the little countries. We have the U.S. annexing Guam and Puerto Rico, and they become territories. So we do end up grabbing them up. But what about the Philippines? Do we remain true to our Republican ideals, where we give them their freedom, just like we fought for our freedom with Great Britain? Or do we become an imperial empire and take up the Philippines as well? So, reasons to take the Philippines. Again, economic and military benefits, put bases there. On top of that, large market for American goods. I believe that we had a moral duty to teach the less civilized people how to live. And again, like a New England minister said, surely the Spanish War was not been a grab for empire, but a heroic effort to free the oppressed and to teach the millions of ignorant, debased human beings thus freed how to live. Again, there was a big sense of this during that time, that these guys are barbaric and we need to save them. But we have also reasons not to annex and take the Philippines. Again, some anti-imperialists said that the cost of the empire far outweighed the economic benefits it provided. I mean, the thing is on the other half of the world, over in the Pacific Ocean. Now, cheap labor could drive down U.S. wages, and imperialism violated the American principles. Nevertheless, President McKinley says we are going to annex the Philippines. And so we signed the Treaty of Paris. U.S. and Spain signed this treaty together. Cuba becomes independent. The U.S. acquires Puerto Rico and Guam and pays Spain $20 million for the Philippines. We are officially an imperial empire, and I am officially out of time. So, ladies and gentlemen, again, study up, and if you have anything at all, just say the word, okay? We'll see you on the next vlog.